Welcome to this lesson on percents and fractions. Please be sure you have these notes in front of you so that we can begin our lesson. This lesson has two different I can statements. The first I can statement says I can write percents as a fraction, and the second I can statement says I can write fractions as percents. So the key concept for today is I want to discuss the word percent. And a percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. So let's go ahead and zoom in on our first part of our key concept, and let's discuss 30%. Since we said that a percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100, I can write 30% as 30 over 100. So I want to visually show you what 30 over 100 or 30% looks like. If I have a 10 by 10 grid like the one above, I know that there's 100 squares in that grid. And each square in that grid would represent 1%. So if I have a total of 100 squares, the total of that would be 100%. I want to show you what 30% looks like. 30% looks like the shaded region, because I've shaded 30 squares out of a total of 100. This was an example of a percentage less than 100. Let's take a look at an example where the percentage is more than 100. So I've got 150% here. If you think about something that's 150%, think of it as extra, or extra credit. If something was extra credit, it would be worth more than 100%. So 150% is more than 100%, which means I need two of these boxes above. I can write 150% as 150 over 100, because every percentage is always out of 100. Now let's look at what it visually looks like on a diagram. I shaded 100 squares, but that's not enough because my percentage says 150. So I'm going to have to shade more squares in our second grid. So in my second grid I shaded 10 more. This is 110%. So I need a little bit more. This now shows 120%. I still need a little bit more. Now the grid looks like 130%. This is what 140% looks like. And this is what 150% visually looks like. So we can also show what a percent looks like using a tape diagram. So I'm going to go back and use the same exact numbers, 30%. And let's zoom in and look at what our tape diagram looks like here. Let's go ahead and add another box to this because there should be 10 boxes total. So just like a double number line, what I can do is I can label the bottom percents and I could label the top the number value. So the value of 0 is worth 0%. At the end of our tape diagram, the total amount is worth 100%, and the number value of 100% is 1 whole. Then I counted from 0% to 100% by tens in between. So this is what 10% looks like. Here's 20%, and this is what 30% looks like on a tape diagram. So now let's take a look at this second example. Go ahead and draw a box at the end and a box at the beginning, because there should be 20 boxes total here. So I'm going to label the top part as the number value and the bottom part as percent. Now we're going to start off with 0, and the value of 0 is worth 0% on the bottom. At this middle bar, I'm going to write 100%, and 100% is worth 1 whole. If I continue my bar, I'm going to eventually get to 200% here, and that is worth 2 wholes. So now I labeled from 0 to 100% by counting by 10%. And then after 100%, I continued counting by 10% to get from 100 to 200%. So this is what 100% looks like. Here's 110%, here's 120%, here's 130%, here's 140%, and here is 150%. And this is what it looks like on a tape diagram. So for example 1, The I can statement below says I can write percents as a fraction, and we're given the percent 5%. I know that a percent is a ratio that compares a number to 100. So I can write 5% as a fraction by writing 5 and placing it over 100, because every percentage is out of 100. Notice we can still reduce this fraction. We can divide the top and bottom by 5. So my numerator becomes 1, because 5 divided by 5 is 1, and my denominator becomes 20. So 1 over 20 is equal to 5%. Let's take a look at what 5% looks like visually on a grid diagram. Out of 100 squares, I'm going to go ahead and shade 5 squares, so that diagram shows 5%. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what the tape diagram for 5% would look like. So I'm going to start at 0% on the bottom, and 0% is worth the value of 0. At the end of the diagram, go ahead and extend the box by one more of these little boxes to make a total of 10 boxes. The box at the end is worth 100%. And 100% at the very top is worth 1 whole. So 1 whole is the same as 100%. And at the bottom, I just counted by 10% at each line to complete from 0 to 100%. I know that 5% is between 0 and 1%. So I'm going to shade this region right here. I know the bottom is worth 5%, and the top would be worth 1/20. So that's what 5% or 1/20 looks like on a tape diagram. So let's go ahead and write 48% as a fraction. We know that a percent is a ratio that compares any number to 100. So I'm going to write 48 over 100. But that can be reduced. I could divide the top and bottom by 4 and get 12 over 25. So 12 over 25 is equal to 48%. Now let's see what 48% looks like in our grid that has 100 boxes. So in the grid I've colored 48 boxes because that's 48 out of 100. So that is what 48% looks like visually in a diagram. So now let's look at what 48% would look like in a tape diagram. So first of all, be sure to go ahead and extend this box by one. Now let's start labeling. I know that we're going to start off with 0% at the front, and 0% is worth a value of 0. At the end, this bar is worth 100%, and that 100% is worth 1 whole. So now I labeled the bottom portion and counted by 10% to get from 0 to 100. Let's look and see what 48% would look like on this tape diagram. Here's 10%, here's 20%, here's 30%, and here's 40%. But we know we need a little bit extra, so let's go ahead and go up to close to the 50 mark line and shade all of this because that is what 48% would look like. Bottom, 48% is here, and the fraction would be 12 over 25. And that shows that both fraction and percentage is equal. So pause the video and complete the got it problems, and we'll discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Notice I have 2 got it problems on this page. I've got it problem A and B. And please be sure you show me what they look like using a diagram. It could either be the 100 grid diagram or it could be the tape diagram. But please show me at least one of them. So for example 3, we're still dealing with a percent and we want to convert this percent to a fraction. So they're giving us 154%. I know that since it's a percent, I'm still going to write 154 over 100 because any percent is out of 100%. We can also reduce this. So let's go ahead and reduce this by 2 over 2. And our new fraction would be 77 over 50. And we can't reduce that any further. So I know that 77 over 50 is equal to 154%. Now let's look at the diagram. The reason why I have two 10 by 10 grids is because I am over 100%. So I'm going to color one whole grid because that shows 100%, but I need 54% more. So I'm going to use the second 10 by 10 grid to show that. Here's 110%, here's 120%, 130%, 140%, 150%, and this is what 154% looks like. Now let's zoom in and look at how we can draw a Tate diagram for 154%. But before we do that, go ahead and extend one box to the right and extend one box to the left. When I label this diagram, I know I'm going to start with 0% here, and 0% is equal to 0. And then if I count by 10%, I'm eventually going to reach 100% here. And 100% is worth one whole. Notice that I can continue my diagram, and if I continue that, I eventually will reach 200%. And 200% is worth two wholes. So on the bottom portion, I just counted by 10% to get from 0 to 100. And I also counted from 100 to 200 by counting by 10% as well. So to shade 154%, I'm going to shade one entire bar first. So this is what 100% looks like. This is what 150% looks like. And this is what 154%. For the fraction form would be 77 over 50. And those two numbers are both equal. So pause the video and complete the got it problem. And we will discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Please provide a diagram to show what 275% will look like. It could either be the grid or it could be the tape diagram. Okay, so for example 4, our learning objective changes, and now they're asking us to write fractions as percents. So they're giving us the fraction 7 over 20. I know that I can make my bottom number into a 100 because percents are ratios being compared to 100. So I can make 20 look like 100 by multiplying it by 5. And if I do that to the bottom, I should also do that to the top. So my numerator becomes 35, and my denominator becomes 100. So 35 over 100 is the same as 35%. Now using the 10 by 10 grid, this is what 35% looks like. For example 5, let's go ahead and write this fraction as a percent. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ignore this whole number at first and come back to it at the end. Let's take a look at this fraction, 96 over 200. I can make my denominator look like 100 by dividing the top and bottom by 2. So my fraction would be 48 on top and 100 on the bottom. And yes, we could reduce 48 over 100, but I don't want to because right now I found that the denominator was 100, and I can write a percent out of 100. So that percent would be 48%. But let's not forget the whole number that's in front. So I'm going to drop down the whole number right in front. So the percent would be 148%, which is the same as 1 and 96 over 200. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what 148% would look like on the 10 by 10 grid. Notice we have two of them because I went over my 100% mark. So this is 100%, and this is what 148% looks like. So pause the video, complete the got it problems, and we will discuss the answers in class tomorrow. Notice I have two got it problems on this slide. So let's go ahead and work on example 6. They're asking me to write this fraction 1/8 as a percent. Notice the bottom number, or the denominator, is equal to 8. And it's pretty difficult to make the 8 look like 100. But what we can do is we can scale back. So let's go ahead and make that 8. And let's scale back by dividing that by 2. Because then we can get 4 on the bottom. But if I scale back by 2 on the bottom, I have to make sure I scale back by 2 on the top. And 1 divided by 2 can be written like this. 1 over 2. It's a fraction. Let's go ahead and make that 4, the denominator, into 100. I can multiply that by 25. And if I multiply the bottom by 25, I get 100. Let's multiply the top by 25 as well. So 1/2 times 25. You can make 25 look like a fraction by placing it over 1. And multiplying the numerators, I get 25. And multiplying the denominators, I get 2. And 25 divided by 2 gets me 12.5. So 12.5 would be my numerator above 100. So my percentage for 1/8 is equal to 12.5%, because the 12.5 was over 100. On the 10 by 10 grid, this is what 12% looks like, but 12.5% would look like half of one of these boxes. So now this is what 12.5% looks like. So pause the video, complete the guided problem, and we will discuss the answer in class tomorrow. So now that we've completed the lesson, go ahead and self-rate yourself and let us know how you feel. If there's any part of this video that you do not understand, please go back and watch it again, or come to class with some questions so we can discuss it in further detail.